Hello and welcome to Rising. I'm Niall Stanage from The Hill and I'm joined today by Nayyera. We'll be bringing a little bit of a different tone to your Rising this Friday and we've a great show lined up. Nayyera, good to see you.
Good to see you, Niall. Thanks for having me.
Plenty to talk about for sure.
Ooh, let's get right to it then.
Alrighty. So President Biden was adamant that he would stay in the race during his crucial hour-long press conference last night. Let's have a look.
You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
Have shown mixed results as to whether last month's disastrous debate changed voters' minds. A new NPR poll found Biden actually gained a point, rather surprisingly, since last month, leading Trump 50% to 48% in that poll. But another recent Washington Post ABC News Ipsos survey found that more than half of Democrats say Biden should end his candidacy. Last night, Biden also went after former President Donald Trump while reaffirming his own commitments to NATO and to Ukraine.
My predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, do whatever the hell you want. In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear, a strong NATO is essential to American security.
But a couple of gaffes could overshadow everything else. Let's watch.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one.
And as if that wasn't enough, this clip of Biden briefly mixing up Presidents Putin and Zelensky also went viral.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
So, not great on the whole. Generally speaking, if you're calling a press conference to display your competence, it's not a great idea to misstate the name of your own vice president or the foreign president whom you're trying to help repel an invasion. What did you make of it all?
I mean, you tell me. You were in the room. You watched the whole thing. I mean, ostensibly, this was a press conference on paper that was about showing America's alliance and leadership on the world stage and democracy. And we all know it was really about watching Biden. How did it feel?
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about it. Afterwards, when I spoke to people who'd watched it on TV, and these are not Democrats or Republicans here, they thought that it was, I think, on balance positive for Biden. In the room, it didn't feel all that great to me. I mean, there were the Kamala Harris gaffe obviously was part of it, but just in terms of the performative element in politics, you know, there's the scratchy voice, there's the hesitancy. Yes, I take the point that he did at times display a kind of depth of knowledge, particularly in foreign affairs, and of course he's been around forever, so that helps him in that respect. But, you know, the bottom line, it seems to me, for Democrats is at the debate and after the debate, they sort of lost faith in Biden's ability to beat Trump. That's really the bottom line. And I didn't think he restored that faith last night.
The challenge, too, right, is that he is talking about policy issues and substance, and they want to pivot back to that to continue to draw that contrast between Trump. But Biden's just continues to literally stumble, verbally stumble into the Trump argument, which is that, you know, that the Sleepy Joe. And now that you have leaders in the party, I will say yes, billionaire donors, former Obama officials who have seen this prior to the debate, they're the ones saying this has been going on for much longer than the public or even the press was allowed to be aware.
Right, and the danger here is that because of that factor, the election then ends up becoming a referendum on Biden and a referendum on Biden's cognitive abilities. And that seems to me a referendum that he's almost certain to lose, because we look at polls and it's about 70 to 80% of all voters who have serious qualms about his capacity to serve a second term effectively. What Democrats, I think, generally speaking, hoped for was actually completely the opposite, to make this election a referendum on Trump.
Yeah.
You talk about January the 6th, you talk about his authoritarian-leaning plans for a second term if he's elected to that term, you talk about his personality and his incendiary rhetoric and all the rest of it. That has not been so much of a focus because people are wondering, does Biden have cognitively what it takes for 4 more years?
It is so hard to run a candidate purely in opposition to somebody else, right? So there's the opposition to Trump and many things Democrats and many people can say there, but the challenge is when you're an incumbent, you have to be able to speak positively and get your own narrative out. And Biden, up until now, has, despite his agenda, plenty of people touting that, has been defined by Trump. And sounds like Trump would much prefer to have Biden continue. And when you look at some of the polling and throw random Democrat in there up against the folks who are ardently Biden seem to be folks who will take any Democrat. They just don't want to mess up momentum, financing, and party politics. But they will vote Democrat, period.
Yeah.
So what's the argument then for Biden to say he has to stay in the race if ultimately people will still vote on that side, will still vote for a Democrat?
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument is about the sort of turmoil that it would entail, right? I mean, that is itself quite telling, that the strongest pro-Biden argument is getting rid of him would be too much trouble, is in essence what that argument
avoid
is.
the Democrats in disarray thing.
Right.
Which then Democrats are also now showing themselves in disarray.
Sure. And I think, some of that argument, I think, is sort of overhyped and nonsense. But one element of it that I do think is interesting is clearly if it were not Biden, the instant favourite would be Vice President Harris. Now, she has
I love that you said instant favourite, because there's such a loaded word to call her favorite.
Right, because I mean, the thing about it, she has very obvious political vulnerabilities, right? I think if there were a blank slate, if there was no Democratic president, no Democratic nominee, and you polled Democrats and said, who'd be your best candidate? I don't think it would be either Biden or Harris. Personally, I think it might be Gretchen Whitmer, for example. But an argument that behind the scenes is used by Biden people is, well, would Kamala Harris do any better for a start? And then if you throw Kamala Harris overboard for somebody else entirely, then you have taken what could be seen as sort of just desserts away from a black woman, a woman of South Asian heritage.
Well, and who has served in office, who is a prosecutor and in theory could prosecute Trump, who is technically still out on bail, right? Like that narrative could come out. I think Democrats underestimate how many people voted for that ticket knowing that Biden said he would not try for another 4 years, right? That idea that, okay, for younger voters, millennials, this is a stabilization operation. We need to get back to normal after COVID. And there is a plan to pass the baton. Very clearly, nobody else stepped up to primary challenge him because the incumbent decided he wanted to hold on to power. And it's what people in power tend to do, especially dudes in power in the White House. They're like, yes, if I can stay, I would like to stay here at the top of the world. So where do you go from there?
You say dudes in power. I'm not sure if we'd have a President Hillary Clinton. She'd have given up the baton terribly easily.
Anyway. This is going to be my fun data point, because I like to throw out global data. Jacinda Ardern stepped aside. 5 years, was the incumbent, had a pretty positive, might have had a challenging campaign, but she stepped aside after 5 years, which is longer than the 4 that Trump has ever served, or many presidents have served. And she said, I've done what I can. I'm good. I have other things to do with my life. That's why I specifically say I have not seen a dude actually say, I'm done being president. But, again, setting aside the gender dynamics of all of this, what are they supposed to do now? When Biden, his biggest donors, the next generation is saying, you didn't give us a chance. You have till August 5th to figure out whether or not to throw this convention into disarray.
A whole lot to think about for sure, and not very many easy options for the Democrats.
And not many people who are of Biden's generation, who could have sway on him, being clear about what they want. Pelosi the other day, clearly saying he has something to think about. Well, Biden's made it clear he's not thinking about it. I mean, you heard this yesterday. He's not thinking about it. So somebody else, some other group of people will have to force this conversation, or we're just going to slow walk our way through a convention that's going to be unity for Democrats.
More to talk about, including maybe more New Zealand politics. Who knows what lies in store? But join us next for more Rising.